Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for the first webinar of this series, introducing the research priority teams of the ICARP IV process. My name is Nina Lavrenteva. I work with the European Polar Board, and I'm here with the co-chairs of the ICARP IV Research Priority Team 2, Observing, Reconstructing, and Predicting Future Climate Dynamics and Ecosystem Responses. Here with me are Margaret Rudolf from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Jeff Welker from the University of Alaska Anchorage and University of Oulu, Syndonia Bret-Harte, University of Alaska Fairbanks, Robbie Mallett, the Arctic University of Norway, and Wilson Cheung from Queen's University in Canada. Welcome. I just wanted to share a couple of words about the ICARP process itself. So the International Arctic Science Committee, IASC, in cooperation with many partners worldwide, is coordinating a multi-year planning process for the 4th International Conference on Arctic Research Planning. It lasts from 2022 to 2026 and engages Arctic researchers, indigenous peoples, policymakers, residents, and stakeholders from around the world to discuss the state of Arctic science, the place that Arctic occupies in global affairs and systems, and it aims to consider the most urgent knowledge gaps and Arctic research priorities for the next decade and explore avenues to address these gaps. So between 2024 and 2025, the ICARP IV International Steering Committee convened 7 research priority teams that will work with the input provided through the ICARP IV community engagement process to first define knowledge gaps and research priorities for their topic area, and second, to identify and suggest opportunities to enhance synergies across existing and potential research plans. The European Polar Board is very happy to host these webinars for the research priority teams. And so we will start with the presentation from the Research Priority Team 2. And we also have a Q&A box for you to use for your comments and questions that we'll take after the presentation. And with that, I'm giving the floor to Robbie, please.
Thanks, Nina. I'll just share my slides. And thank you, everyone, for coming. There's quite a lot of people in the audience, which is really great to see so many people engaging with what we're doing. So can someone just make a noise if you can see my slide?
It works, yes.
Great. Okay, so we can just do a quick round of introductions to the co-chairs. I think that will be good to go first. So this is me. I work in Tromsø in northern Norway for the Arctic University of Norway. I'm one of the co-chairs of RPT2, along with some others on the panel, and my specialism is sea ice, where it is, what's it doing, what's it covered with, and how is that going to change over time. So I can flick to the next slide, and Margaret, do you want to introduce yourself perhaps? Or I can introduce you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Margaret Rudolf. My Inupiat name's Anamak. I'm a postdoc at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I study co-production knowledge, conversions, evaluation, just engagement. And my linkages to Arctic observing is that I am currently on a project thinking about how we meet the needs of Arctic Indigenous peoples with observing. I'm on the SAON, the Sustaining Arctic Observing Networks, Arctic Roads, and so that is specifically developing a roadmap on how to develop partnerships with Indigenous communities. And it's very early in Alaska, so thanks, Robbie, for taking the lead on this.
Great, thanks, Margaret. And next is Doni, if you're in the chat, in the panel.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, Robbie. Like Margaret, I feel it's very early in Alaska, so I'm glad you are leading this. I'm a professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I'm also the science co-director of the Toolik Field Station. And I'm a co-chair along with Margaret, Robbie, and Wilson. And my expertise is really in terrestrial plant vegetation and ecosystem ecology and long-term observations. And I'm interested in how terrestrial ecosystems feed back to affect the climate, among other things. So thank you very much.
Great. And Wilson.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? It's good?
Yep.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, my name is Cheung, actually from Hong Kong, but you can call me Wilson. And now I'm at Queen University. It's my final year of my PhD. My specialty is in mass balance monitor or photogrammetry processing and using remote sensing to monitor the glacier and ice cap.
Great, thanks. I feel like we have quite a nice nice coverage of the RPT remit with the sort of marine and terrestrial cryosphere, but also Margaret with the people that live in the Arctic, and Donia in terms of some of the biology and ecosystem stuff that's going on. So I think it's working quite well in terms of who we are and what we do. Here's a recap of ICARP IV, but I'm aware that Nina gave us one. So I won't go through this slide in great detail, but we've really tried to focus on the 3 bullet points here to focus on knowledge gaps, but also research needs, which aren't necessarily the same thing. And we've thought a little bit about that. And also we're trying to work with the other RPTs to enhance synergies, to use the lingo, to work together to produce something better than we can individually. Here's a rough timeline for those that aren't familiar with ICARP. So we're, of course, just starting 2024 in the run-up to ASSW, which will happen in early 2025. And that is the ICARP IV summit. So the C in ICARP is conference. I don't think we've actually spelled it out as the International Conference on Arctic Research Planning. So it is actually, by its nature, a meeting of people to really thrash it out. And that's really what we're thinking on. We have an intermediate milestone coming up in Anchorage in Northern Iceland it's in October, late October. So the co-chairs will go to that, and we'll meet the other co-chairs and try and prepare ourselves for March in Boulder 2025 and recap and consider some of the work we've done in our individual teams so far. And then in phase 5 in 2026, we present these final outcomes from the individual teams, and then I think the ICARP steering committee, which is not very related to the RPTs, takes over and synthesizes the contributions from the teams into a final report and recommendations that get looked at by policy and decision makers. This is our remit. So the name of the team is sufficiently long that it kind of gives away most of the key bits, but it's very broad, is our key observation and experience. It's been a real challenge to explore all the parts of the team name, but also not make the remit and the activities so broad that we can't actually make meaningful recommendations. And to do that and to try and break it down, we've split into a few subgroups. So marine, terrestrial, atmosphere, indigenous, and interactions. So we've got members of the research priority teams on each of these subgroups. Some members are in more than one subgroup at a time, and they're going through essentially all of the literature that's been published, but also responses to the ICARP survey, and trying to draw together as much as they can from these documents and these submissions in terms of what the research community needs. And we're really trying to focus on submissions and publications rather than our own opinions. So I think a lot of people have an expectation that members of these research priority teams are just meeting up and giving their opinions, which would totally be a way to do it. It's not bad to have opinions, and it's not bad to have personal priorities, but we've tried our best, I think, to put those aside and look at the objective evidence and the objective stated opinions from groups outside of our own in terms of what we need and where we need to go as a research community. You might be wondering where the cryosphere is in this, but we found that the cryosphere was quite overlapping with some of the other groups and interactions. So we've closed that one down, and we've kind of integrated the cryosphere into these other named subgroups. The reason indigenous comes with an asterisk afterwards is that it's doing slightly more than its name might suggest, that it also is a sort of cross-cutting across the RPTs group, because there is, of course, an indigenous focus RPT all to itself. So it's important that we don't duplicate work between the RPTs. So here's what we've done so far. We had a super productive 2-day meeting in Edinburgh at the Arctic Science Summit Week. We focused most of the first day actually on kind of the terms of reference, you might call them, of the RPT. So thinking about who we're really doing this for and why we're doing it and what we're perhaps not doing but would be tempted to do otherwise. And just focusing on who is a stakeholder, who perhaps goes beyond just having a financial or economic stake and has rights to what goes on in the Arctic and what is in the Arctic, and what sort of literature we are and are not going to consider. Since then, we've been having online meetings, of course, because we haven't had a sort of co-location since then. And we've left those largely to the individual subgroups. So the subgroups have been meeting and discussing the literature that they've been looking at. I know Wilson made some really, really useful AI summaries that essentially looked at some of the larger texts, like some of these documents from particularly funding agencies can be many tens and even hundreds of pages. So we've used AI to summarize some of those, and I'm sure that Wilson will be happy to take questions on that afterwards if there are any. And then each of the subgroups has been funneling all of their reading and their analysis into 3 recommendations per subgroup. And we recently had a meeting to move towards drawing those together before the meeting in Anchorage in late October. So we do hope to have that first draft by the meeting in Anchorage, and we can, of course, talk to the co-chairs of the other RPTs, because there'll be some duplication, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if themes emerge consistently across the RPTs, then that's a good thing, because that's a way that we can potentially prioritize certain cross-cutting or universally relevant concepts or targets. Here is what I was referencing that we did on the first day of ASSW. So we tried to make a mental model of who we're going to listen to, who we're going to represent, and who perhaps deserves our attention at the absolute core, and then with decreasing priority moving out. And there was quite a productive and vibrant discussion, I would say, about how to actually construct this mental model, because it's super important to all be on the same page before we go out and decide on these research priorities. I don't know if, Margaret, you have anything you want to say about this? Possibly.
No, I think you did great. I'd probably just add that's the sense of like who we should make sure we're having representation for in the documents we're looking at.
Yeah, I should say that Margaret really led this activity and put it together. So thanks to her for doing that. I think without doing that, we might have had quite a chaotic first 2 days in Edinburgh, actually. So we're really grateful for that. So yeah, I've spelled out the timeline a little bit, but here is a recap and the roadmap of where we're going to go. We have this, I think it's 5-day maybe meeting in Anchorage in October, just for the co-chairs, and then all of the RPT members are invited to the actual Research Priority Conference Summit in Boulder in March 2025 that overlaps with the Arctic Science Summit Week. And then we need to really get these recommendations to the steering committee after that. So yeah, we're going to make our recommendations public, because the actual report could be quite slim. It could be quite short. So I think there's going to be sort of some supplemental material going beyond what's just in the final report made available online. think that might be my last slide. Oh, no, we've got more slides. Yeah, we recapped. We've definitely had some challenges. People have been busy over the summer field season, so not all of these subgroups have been meeting consistently. That was certainly one of the reasons that we split the cryosphere subgroup up a little bit. It was a challenge to meet consistently. We've definitely had some challenges about the remit that took us a while to coordinate with the other RPTs. And also, sometimes there's been a bit of a lack of communication in sort of vertical direction within IASC, but that does seem to be resolved now. We've had some nice communication via email in the last, I'd say, couple of months that have really clarified things for us. This is still open. This is an important part of ICARP, that there is a survey, and we would really like, if you're listening to this, for you to submit, because we don't want to just have this as a list of the team member opinions, right? We want it to be evidence-based and submission-based. So if you go on the IASC website, there are various ways to actually engage with ICARP. Sorry, I should have said the ICARP website. And there is more to ICARP than just the survey. So ICARP can endorse activities. I'm going to have a workshop in Norway in November to try and coordinate some of the Norwegian contributions to ICARP and the IPY. So I know that I think Margaret has got some endorsed activities coming up. So there's lots of things you can do beyond the survey, but we would really, really like you to do the survey because that's the best route to making your voice heard, particularly if you represent a larger group, if you work for, if you lead a research group or a funding agency, or you work for an NGO, or you represent a community, you're particularly valuable in this process. So please do participate. Here's a little summary of that. I think you can also just catch us. We prefer a written submission, but if you're at ASSW in March or February of next year, I forget when it is, then please do come and talk to any of the co-chairs about your thoughts or ways you would like to input that are perhaps outside of the frameworks that have been set up. If you feel limited by the modes on the last slide, then just let us know. And also now, right, we're going to have a Q&A right after this presentation, so please do speak out. And that is my final slide. So I'm really grateful for you all for coming, and we'd love to take your questions or listen to your thoughts. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you very much. So just a reminder, there's a Q&A box on your screen somewhere in the bottom normally. So please don't hesitate to leave your comments and questions there. Is there anything co-chairs want to add to this presentation? Maybe something about challenges and further steps for your research priority team.
I thought Robbie covered it really well. We were hoping, I think originally, that we might have some recommendations to present at this point, but because the summer fieldwork was hectic, we haven't quite gotten to that point yet. So this webinar is mostly about the process and not what we're contemplating recommending. But I would say that there'll be more opportunities in the future to weigh in on the recommendations. Certainly at the ICARP Summit in Boulder next year, we'll be presenting recommendations, but they'll be draft recommendations. And so you're welcome to weigh in at that point and say, oh no, we think you should do this instead, or whatever. We have been told by the ICARP steering committee that we should try to have a small number of recommendations, because as they compile the report from all the different RPT teams, they don't want to have too many things. So that in a way is a bit of a challenge, because obviously there's a tremendous amount of literature that we're reading and a lot of voices and input coming in. And so condensing down is going to be a little bit of a challenge. But still in all, we want to have a good material to condense down from. And so we really do want your input if you have it, and we want to make sure that the process by which the recommendations are derived is a fair and open process.
Yeah, I'd say credibility has been the key word and the key challenge for us to make sure that we're representing as many people as possible, as effectively as possible.
I have a question. Maybe I can also throw one in. So what is you were saying there is going to be a meeting of co-chairs of all the RPTs soon in Iceland. What are your expectations from this meeting, and what are you looking for in terms of your further work, in terms of this helping your further work on your area, on your research priority area?
I would say the main purpose of the Akureyri meeting is for each of the different RPT teams to present what they've come up with so far. And then we're going to look to see where there's synergies and coordination across the RPTs so that we can make sure that everybody's sort of on the same page, so to speak. And also that if there's like duplication with other groups, that kind of gets weeded out, right? So that we can have a clear set of recommendations going forward. So that, I think I would describe that as the main purpose, right? So all the RPTs are meeting independently, and we have had some, like I've attended a meeting of RPT1, which has some overlap with us because they're concerned with larger scale models of the climate, and we're concerned with ecosystem responses, but still the modeling aspect is in common. And then also RPT7, which is the infrastructure, services, technology, and logistics, is a cross-cutting RPT. And they definitely feel, I'm a member of that one also, but not a co-chair. They definitely feel that they can't come up with good final recommendations until they know what the needs of all the other groups are, right? Because they're supposed to be, their technology, the infrastructure and services are supposed to be feeding the science initiatives that are put forward by the other RPTs. So that this meeting in Akureyri will be a chance for all the RPT co-chairs to get together and share what they're working on. And then I imagine there'll be some refinement that will happen as a result of that collaboration.
We have a question in the Q&A box that I will read out. And I thought about writing down an answer, but I wanted to maybe say it before committing it to pen. So will the draft of the recommendation document be shared online for edits before the Boulder meeting so that people can get involved in synthesizing the text and missing gaps? My intuitive answer is that it will be shared online within the RPT. So members of the RPT will have the chance to edit that, but I don't think it will be public before Boulder. Does that sound reasonable to the other co-chairs? I'm not sure if we've discussed that.
I think that sounds reasonable. I know that Gerlis has said that, all the work of the RPTs will be made public, even if it doesn't get incorporated into the final report. And so, looking at our group, for example, we have 5 subgroups. If each, and we get 5 recommendations. So that's like 1 recommendation per subgroup. Well, that's pretty little considering all of the, all the work that's been invested in each of these areas. And so I suspect that we will, we'll be making material available, and the other subgroups will as well, that expands more on what they've been doing and isn't just the 5 recommendations that get submitted to the ISC steering committee for the final report. And I guess one way of thinking about this too, at least how I've been thinking about it recently, is that, you know, there's like the scientific audience, which in general are people that are focused in like detail and maybe have a little bit more time than like the government ministers who have like 30 seconds to read the report because they're so busy. And so, you know, what the IS steering committee will produce will be primarily for that public facing audience, and the scientists may well be interested in the more detailed work of the RPTs. So, you know, so just because something doesn't make it into the final IS report doesn't mean that it's not important.
Great. Another question that's just popped up in the box is, there is a call for abstracts to the ASSW 2025 ICARP Summit. What kind of contributions do you look for and for whom? Do you have any more info about these? So that is the way to get an ASSW session is slightly beyond our not beyond our pay grade, but it's not in the wheelhouse, I would say, of us as RPT co-chairs. But I think the best thing to do would be to contact the organizing committee of ASSW for that kind of information. We have, I believe, submitted for a session for the RPT, so we can have an in-person meeting and a room in the AV and all of that stuff. So we'll have a meeting. But if you would like to have a meeting about your issue or your project, then I'm afraid I don't think we can give any formal or technical advice. Sorry.
Well, I can add a little bit because I did learn a little bit about the program. So the ICARP Summit itself is the last 3 days of the meeting. And in that period, there will be a 90-minute town hall for each of the RPTs for us to gain input. But there's also the possibility for many meetings in the community and business meeting part, which is the first 4 days of the meeting. And I think anybody can put forward a proposal. And they will try to accommodate as many as they can, right? I mean, I think they'll give priority to requests that are received before September 30th. But really, it's all pretty self-organized. So if there's something that you're interested in and you think it would be beneficial to have a meeting in the community and business meeting time, you should definitely put forward a small proposal and they will try to find a room for you. All those community and business meetings there's no guarantee that they won't overlap, right? But they are trying to, I think, keep the ICARP Summit, our town halls from overlapping so that people can go to all of them so that you won't have to choose between this RPT and that RPT when you're deciding which town hall to go to. But I'll also add to Robbie that we're not organizing that meeting, so we're just following directions.
Great. I can't see any more questions. So I guess
there's one more, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Robbie. I think you can take it.
This is a challenging question. It concerns the breakdown of our subgroups and how we've split up our team's remit into 7 subgroups. So the question is, are all the ecotones, for example, intertidal ecosystems, glacier fronts, fjords, represented in the interactions subgroup? I don't know the answer to that. I suspect there's overlap, right? There's a lot of overlap between the teams, so they're possibly doubly represented. But it is possible that there are things also falling through the gaps. So that's certainly something we need to consider, and we will be in the run up to Ocarary. I don't know if Doni, you have some ecosystem insight into this. I don't actually know what an ecotone is, so
it's a boundary between 2 ecosystem types, like between the boreal forest and the tundra, for example, where you get a little bit of each, right? And oftentimes there's special things that happen right at that boundary. I would say that the interactions group is is interested in ecotones, they're also interested in sort of generally thinking about how, for example, the atmosphere is influenced by the land. In other words, how there's connections between the different topics. But I would say that as Robbie said, that's a challenge, right? It could be that it won't get all the attention it deserves, and that's why a comment about it in the survey would be really helpful. But yeah, we'll do the best we can.
I think there is one more question.
Okay, I'm going to try and use the interface a bit more, answer live. Okay. The question is, do you have connections of your timeline and new process linked to the same priorities of ICARP 3? Ooh. So how does our work relate to the previous iteration of ICARP? I actually don't know.
I'll jump in again.
Sure if any of my
Sorry to
co-chairs.
always be like being bossy here, but yeah. So I think that our theme basically was developed as a part of the ICARP 3 process, and that's why I think all the RPTs originally, except for the indigenous one, were things that were identified in the ICARP 3 process. But then through the process that's ongoing now, some of them have changed their names and their topics a bit, to reflect better what the current members are doing. But I think that the reason why we were handed this large platter of observing and reconstructing climate in ecosystem responses was because that was what was identified in the ICARP 3 process. And we have chosen to stick with our original remit, unlike some of the other groups.
We do have some time for a couple of more questions. If anyone in the audience would like to ask more. Or otherwise, if co-chairs have anything to add or to comment on, you're welcome to.
I can't say that I do, but we're always if you're not sure about asking a question here, you can always send us an email.
Okay, I think there's another question in the Q&A box.
Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah. What is roughly the balance between scientific literature-informed priorities and community-informed priorities at this point? So, yeah, how are we balancing published documents on what various organizations need us to do versus people who fill out the survey, and how are we balancing scientific organizations' priorities with people who live and rely on the Arctic's priorities? I think it will be tough to put a number on that.
Well, I'll make one comment, which is that, we were instructed fairly strongly that, many of the folks that live in the Arctic have in fact come up with plans of what they think is important, and that before we go and bother a bunch of people, we should read what they've written and see what they have to say. And so, so we've incorporated a number of documents that have been developed by indigenous groups like Kwerik and Inuit Circumpolar Council, to try to get a sense of what the priorities of the people that are living on the land is. So in addition to reading our science planning documents, which were developed by scientists, I think our literature search is taking into account some of the voices of people that live on the land. And then we're also considering the comments that come in the survey. It's a large amount of literature. Thank goodness for Wilson's AI summaries.
Yeah, and at this point, I can add some insight actually, because we collect quite a lot of literature, papers, and a lot of text work as well. So I try to build a robot and then put all the paper work and then all the PDF into one robot, and then and we try to restrict the output of this robot with all the literature they contain, and end up is a quite nice summarize with three main questions we ask, and then they deliver some suggestion for each PDF or paperwork we input. And this, I think, may be a solution to balance or to answer this question in more comprehensive way instead of one literature or one community, and then try to give one suggestion instead. So yeah, I'm trying to working another solution as well, because there's quite a lot of new technology nowadays, and then yeah, so this may be a solution.
It's a good question, though. It's an important thing to consider.
I will say that we're not considering literature that was written in Russian because we don't have ourselves the ability to translate that literature. I think the scientific community as a whole really strongly recognizes that Russia makes up a huge part of the Arctic, and that we can't, consider the future without considering Russia. But it's very difficult right now with the geopolitical situation to have, many of the collaborations of the Russian scientists that the community, writing as the royal we here, have participated in the past, have been cut off, by the war in Ukraine. And so, yeah, it's a challenging issue, which, satellites only get you so far, right? So.
And if you don't mind, sorry.
Go ahead, Wilson.
If you don't mind, I respond a little bit as well in here. And actually, I was studying in St. Petersburg State University in Russia, and I tried to talk with my colleagues, but it's very difficult that they can contribute or share the data or even their insights outside of Russia, because it's a national secret now, or top secret for them. So although they would like to contribute for sure, 40% of Canadian in Russian in the Arctic is in Russia, and then we cannot miss this part as well. But however, as Syndonia mentioned before, it's quite challenging. But we are open for this for sure. And then second thing is, yeah, that's it. Right.
I think it's maybe also relevant to say I don't think we have any representatives of Russian research organizations on the team, which is unfortunate.
Okay, I don't see any new questions in the Q&A box. As Robbie mentioned, you can always contact the research priority team directly, and also check out the ICARP website to find out more about the ways to engage with the process, because it's the major part of the community engagement. So I would like to thank everyone for their questions and the panelists for the presentations. It was really interesting to find out about the research priority team and your future plans. And we are looking forward to learning more about your work. And thank you to all the attendees for joining. And we are also just a reminder that the other research priority teams are also going to have their webinars hosted by the European Polar Board. And here are the 3 days that we know of so far. So please join us and find out more about their work as well. And you can also find more information on the European Polar Board website, and then register for the webinars as well. All right.
And thank you to the EPB as well for organizing this. It's been great.
Yes, thank you for organizing and thank you for attending. And especially since it's late in Europe, even though it's very early in Alaska. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.